Welcome to the second edition of the Asia Pacific Foundation for Canada's Election Focus Series. This video will be looking at South Korean and Japan relations, consider the implications of the current state of relations between the two states, both for the region and for Canada, and provide some policy guidance going forward for the Canadian government. Thank you very much.
The current dispute involves several issues. The first is a Korean court decision last year that holds Japanese firms liable to pay compensation to Korean laborers forced to work during the Second World War. It also involves the seizure of Japanese corporate assets in Korea. The second issue is, I believe, Korea's continuing efforts to shame Japan over its administration of wartime brothels by publicizing the comfort woman issue.
From the South Korean government's perspective, there are also two sets of causes. One is short-term, the other long-term. Now, the short-term cause was when Japan announced in early July, unilaterally and unexpectedly, that it would be restricting exports of three key components for the manufacture of semiconductors to South Korea, and that it would be removing South Korea from its trade whitelist. This is a list of trusted trading partners. The second or long-term cause of these tensions from the perspective of the South Korean government, as well as the South Korean public, is the repeated and consistent unwillingness of the Japanese government to acknowledge the illegality of colonial rule, the fundamental problems with the 1965 treaty, and also the 2015 Comfort Woman Agreement.
This is a pretty dramatic crisis. The worst moment in the bilateral relationship since 1965, since they resumed diplomatic relations. It's a very, very serious case. And if you look at it from a Japanese perspective, the Japanese side thinks that Korea has gone against the foundational treaty of 1965 that reopened diplomatic relationships. So in a sense, they're questioning a treaty. That's how Japan sees it. They see this as very serious. On the other side, the Koreans see the current Japanese actions, such as blocking access to certain imports of critical components that are critical to Samsung in particular, as economic bullying of the type that either China or now the US under Trump are doing, but something that's illegal under WTO.
I think one of the issues that is getting a lot of attention, garnering a lot of attention in the international press of late is this issue of whitelist exemptions. And I think Japan has removed South Korea from this whitelist, which from Japan's perspective is done strictly on national security terms. South Korea, on the other hand, I think believes that it's being punished due to its kind of position on a range of other historical issues.
The Moon administration has an election coming up in April 2020, so there's a lot at stake. And it is in their domestic interest to continue leveraging the anti-Japanese sentiment.
Now, the current tensions that we're seeing have really increased, and it's very much related to the Japanese government's decision to slow the process of exports of three particular semiconductor material that goes into South Korean blue chip businesses.
And in case of Tokyo, they've just had the election, but also most of the Japanese citizens seem to be showing support for the recent action of the Abe government.
South Korea and Japan really have no business being enemies. They have an enormously long list of shared interests and shared values. They do have an unfortunate history, and historical grievances linger. This is not unusual, but they have been dealt with on a state-to-state business over the course of the years, and it's unfortunate that they are rearing their ugly heads once again at a time when it's especially important for the two countries to be collaborating as much as possible, given the range of security and economic challenges in East Asia.
So when we do see South Korea coming forward and saying that it's going to voluntarily withdraw from intelligence mechanism sharings, or we see the South Korean military engaged in operations or in exercises that can be seen from a Japan perspective as being inherently antagonistic, those things put a strain on the existing architecture that not only have implications for the two states within Northeast Asia, but of course also have implications back to Canada, as the primary, I think, national interest of Canada in Northeast Asia is for overall stability.
The implications for Canada, South Korea, and Japan are both important trading and political partners in the region. The worsening of the relationship between the two countries could really compromise or undermine any kind of efforts that Canada is interested in pursuing within the Asia Pacific.
Yes, so the relationship between Canada and Japan and the relationship between Canada and Korea are very, very important. They are, right next after China, right? So Japan is the second trade partner, and Korea, I think, is third for BC at least, and probably for Canada. So those are very, very important relationships. In addition, especially with Japan, it's a comprehensive partnership. It's our first foreign policy partner in Asia, the first place where we open an embassy. This is a country with whom we share pretty much everything, right? From the political system to alliances, to values, norms, security alliances. So it's a very, very solid partner, very, very important.
Canada has not really been caught in the middle on any of this yet. We have good relations with both South Korea and Japan. There's no particular issue that would threaten to upset our good relations with either. It's up to those two countries to manage their own affairs. So Canada is not really in danger of suffering or being accused of interfering in South Korean and Japanese relations, but we should certainly be sending clear and repeated signals to both Tokyo and Seoul that we and the rest of the world would be very grateful if they could overcome their current squabbles and get back on the right track that they had been on for many, many years before recent events made that unsustainable.
It's difficult, and I think the role for a country like Canada is to encourage them to sort of disengage, stop digging. When there's such a hole, which is so painful and so bad for both of them, everyone else and their partners, at least stop digging, pause a minute, and maybe, countries like Canada can have quiet conversation, listening to both sides, and just the act of listening may give them space to think creatively.